inherently unequal. This is for the Pullman porters who smiled and welcomed a 14-year-old boy onto their train in 1955. They noticed his slight limp that he tried to disguise with a doo-wop walk. They noticed his stutter and probably understood why his mother wanted him out of Chicago during the summer when school was out. 14-year-old black boys with limps and stutters are apt to try to prove themselves in dangerous ways when mothers aren't around to look after them. So this is for the Pullman porters who looked over that 14-year-old while the train rolled the reverse of the Blues Highway from Chicago to St. Louis to Memphis to Mississippi. This is for the men who kept him safe. And if Emmett Till had been able to stay on a train all summer, he would have maybe grown a bit of a paunch, certainly lost his hair, probably have worn bifocals and bounced his grandchildren on his knee, telling them about his summer riding the rails. But he had to get off the train and ended up in Money, Mississippi, and was horribly, brutally, inexcusably, and unacceptably murdered. This is for the Pullman porters who, when the sheriff was trying to get the body secretly buried, got Emmett's body on the northbound train, got his body home to Chicago, where his mother said, I want the world to see what they did to my boy. And this is for all the mothers who cried, and this is for all the people who said, never again. And this is about Rosa Parks, whose feet were not so tired. It had been, after all, an ordinary day until the bus driver gave her the opportunity to make history. This is about Mrs. Rosa Parks from Tuskegee, Alabama, who is also the field secretary of the NAACP. This is about the moment Rosa Parks shouldered her cross, put her worldly goods aside, was willing to sacrifice her life so that young man in Money, Mississippi, who had been so well protected by the Pullman porters, would not have died in vain. When Mrs. Parks said no, a passionate movement was begun. No longer would there be a reliance on the law. There was a higher law. When Mrs. Parks brought that light of hers to expose the evil of the system, the sun came and rested on her shoulders, bringing the heat and the light of truth. Others would follow Mrs. Parks. 4 young men in Greensboro, North Carolina would also say no. Great voices would be raised, singing the praises of God and exhorting us to forgive those who trespass against us. But it was the Pullman porters who safely got Emmett to his granduncle, and it was Mrs. Rosa Parks who could not stand that death. And in not being able to stand it, she sat back down. Thank you very much.
Okay, Liza, now that's some history. That's pretty amazing. And we thank you so much for that. It was really good.
I felt like it was important on this day in particular because I think when we try to say this is Black history, it is also American history, and we need to remember that, and that's part of that racial healing, and I think it's important, and I think the poem is hard to read, but it's gorgeous. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and honoring Nikki Giovanni, who is an amazing poet. Yeah.
Thank you. You're always spot on. We appreciate you so much. Thank you, Liza. We're down to the town manager's update. Town manager Tony.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. In addition to our racial healing work, I just wanted to announce to save the date for the grand opening of the Drakeford Library Complex on February 21st at 11 o'clock a.m. We invite the community to come out and celebrate this ribbon cutting ceremony with us. So we're excited about it.
That's it. And Town Manager Tony, I thought I read that there will be tours afterwards, like from noon to like 6 p.m. Folks can just walk through.
That's right. It'll officially be open to the public.
Great. All right, thanks for that. We are now down to our public comment period. I do have some community members that are signed up to speak. I think I see a couple of people signed up about South Green. And I do want to just say I'm not sure if it's about the bollards or not, but that is not a part of our discussion tonight. We are talking about the South Green SUP for the residential lofts that are proposed to be built there. And so any other discussion about the bollards would not occur tonight. And as far as I know from my colleagues, I don't think anybody's interested in talking about the bollards or moving them or anything, as far as I know. So I did just want to say that, but you are still more than welcome to come up and give public comment. We will start with Sharon Riley, and her subject matter is downtown traffic map. Come on up, Ms. Riley. Welcome.
Thank you. I have a map of the area in the around Maple Avenue. Would that be helpful, or do you guys have access to that? Okay, great. So thanks very much for the opportunity to present some concerns of the residents of Maple Avenue neighborhood about the traffic patterns around the new library. Our primary concern regards Maple Avenue Extension as a one-way street headed south. We'd really like to understand the rationale for that decision, because from the standpoint of those living in on Maple Avenue and East Braxton Fushi, it's really inconvenient. While there's a difference of opinion among residents on whether the street should be a two-way street or a one-way street headed north, there is a clear consensus that if it has to be one way, the traffic direction should be north. That would allow us to leave the neighborhood two different ways, allowing for movement during the busiest times of day and providing the safest and sometimes most expedient option out of the neighborhood, which would be to exit at the light at Roberson and Main Streets. We realize the plan to make the Maple Avenue extension one-way headed south too late in the process to prevent the opening of the road with that as the plan. Unfortunately, all of us missed the presentation of the final plan for the 203 project, which indicates that traffic would be one-way headed south. Now that the road is open, according to that plan, we can report that in addition to the inconvenience to the Maple Avenue neighborhood, there's been much confusion among drivers who turn onto East Braxton Fushi from South Greensboro, many of whom do not intend to visit anyone in the Maple Avenue neighborhood. Residents have reported seeing as many as 4 cars an hour driving on down Maple Avenue in search of a way out of the neighborhood, sometimes exhibiting frustration by way of speeding back up the street after they turn around at the end of Maple. Those who don't turn down Maple turn around in one of the driveways on East Braxton Fushi or in the parking area of the South Orange Rescue Squad, which is a recipe for disaster. We've also witnessed numerous vehicles, including one police car, unfortunately, driving the wrong way despite the arrows painted on the road and the Do Not Enter sign on the East Braxton Fushi end of the road. This street is heavily used as a walkway for students walking to their bus stops or residents walking into commercial areas, but there's no sidewalk and no bike lane, so walkers share the road with drivers. I was nearly hit by one driver as I walked toward the Weaver Street just the other day. Watching for traffic coming from Roberson, I was not aware of the car coming at me from behind. Adding to the confusion, there's still a sign up for the electric vehicle charging station that points drivers to head north on the Maple Avenue extension. So to sum up, the residents of Maple Avenue neighborhood are in agreement that if Maple Avenue extension has to be a one-way road, we would prefer that traffic to be directed to the north on that one-block road. We'd like to hear from you about, number one, the rationale for the decision, what the plan for the signage is to be posted, and are there any plans to add a sidewalk or a bike lane? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Riley. Town Manager Tony is taking these concerns in and will make sure that Maple Avenue neighbors are kept apprised about the concerns. So we appreciate you coming up. Next, we have Christine Council, Maple Avenue Extension Traffic. Welcome.
Hello. I really am just up here in support of what Sharon had to say. I do want to bring up a few concerns that some of my neighbors have mentioned about leaving the neighborhood and the difficulty, prior to the construction. Some of our neighbors have always used the traffic light up at Weaver Street to get out of the neighborhood rather than turning left onto Greensboro Street, because that can be kind of hairy. People are often speeding on Greensboro Street. There's a lot of traffic. So those people that have always used that alternative before don't have that alternative now, and it concerns them a lot. There's also just the idea of people that are unfamiliar with the area, that are coming to the new building, turning on to Braxton Fushi and realizing that they can't get into the parking deck from there, and they have no way to get out unless they come down Maple Avenue and turn around once they figure out that they can't get out on Maple Avenue. There has been also some concern about the EMS station and making sure that they have multiple ways of being able to get out of the neighborhood. I don't know if they've been consulted at all on what the situation is. And although we do have different opinions in the neighborhood about whether it should be two-way or one-way, we definitely would want it to be one-way going north. Another idea would be two-way, maybe with some speed bumps to keep it a traffic calming area. That way we could easily do like a yield type situation. Mostly I want to say that, you know, I'm sorry that we didn't bring this to you earlier, but I think that we all really trust the town of Carrboro to hear our concerns and get back to us, and we're going to figure this out. Thank you.
Yes, we are. Thank you so much. Next up, is this Brad? Brad Bonville. Welcome, Mr. Bonville.
Thank you very much. So really just reiterating points that Christine and Sharon made. And also, any of you that have the printout, I know it was up on the screen, and anyone who's driven or walked through this neighborhood or does so regularly, it's hard not to notice how this is concentrating traffic into the wrong direction and really funneling traffic into our neighborhood and limiting the egress paths out of our neighborhood. And now that we have the parking deck opening, when you have traffic queuing up on Roberson Place to get into the parking deck, or when the parking deck is full, which we will expect it will be, that's just going to exacerbate that, as Sharon pointed out, the frustration we see with delivery drivers, Uber drivers, people who are unfamiliar to the neighborhood, or simply trying to get away from the traffic snarl. And now, if they're on Roberson Street, they're really directed into our neighborhood without a good way to get out. And it's a safety concern, and I think everyone in our neighborhood agrees that we would definitely like to see it change to the one-way traveling in the other direction. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Bonville.
y'all hearing me out.
Yep. Next, I have Robert Joyner, South Green, Purple Leaf Place.
Hi, Robert Joyner, 100 Purple Leaf Place, Roberson.
Yep.
I just wanted to say, I noticed that the developer had put in additional screening for the building, which I do appreciate. We had looked at possibly having that screening closer to us as the building, based on what it was originally shown to be, is much taller now, as it has, I think it was in the 30-foot range approximately, and now it sits around 52 feet tall. So just the visual from some of the existing neighbors that are at the bottom, the original developer had promised additional screening for those buildings. And so I see that some screening has already been provided. We do appreciate that, and wondered if it would be closer just to be able to obstruct the view as it was originally intended.
And thank you for your comments. There is a public hearing on this matter, and I'm feeling like maybe I should. Are you going to hang around for
Absolutely.
that? Yeah, let's hold off on, and this is the gentleman after you. Jordy, Mr. Jordy? Yeah, so you're planning on hanging around for the public hearing? Yeah, so let's bring this back during the public hearing. I
Apologize,
appreciate
Mayor.
it. No, I apologize. Thank you. I don't have anyone else signed up. Is there anyone else that has any public comment about something that is not on the agenda? Anyone? Nope.
I think two of us are also going to be speaking about South Green, but it's actually going to be back.
During the public, okay, well, that's great. Okay, so we're finished with public comment. Bye, Liza. Town Manager Tony, we're down to the consent agenda, please.
Consent agenda consists of 2 items that can be voted on in one vote,
Right.
unless one wants to be pulled.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that. I could have said that. You were looking at me like, okay, Barbara. So we do have the approval of the minutes, October 15th and 2024, January 7th, 2025, along with the appointment of Mayor Pro Tem. And so I can just ask for a motion, and will, for both of these items, we can take care of it all in one swoop if nobody is pulling anything.
Madam Mayor, I move the approval of both items on the consent agenda.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Frey. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Merrill.
Waiting room. Who's
All right,
doing
so it's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Town Manager Tony, we're down to our public hearing.
it? Thank you, Madam Mayor. The public hearing is a quasi-judicial public hearing for South Green mixed-use project at 101 Two Hills Drive. And we have our planning staff, Mr. Marty, who's going to review this item and then open it up for a public hearing.
Good evening, everyone. Nick, do you want to talk about the quasi-judicial process first, or? do you-
Yeah, that's good. Even ahead of Marty, then we'll go ahead and open it up. I can open it now. I'll just go ahead and open the public hearing, and then we'll hear from Town Attorney Herman about the nature of this public hearing.
Do you want to open the public hearing?
I just see it.
Oh.
I'm opening the public
Okay,
hearing. You
got
can
it,
go ahead.
got it. So my short remarks are only a reminder to the council, but mostly it's for the benefit of the public and for those watching this proceeding. As mentioned, it's a quasi-judicial hearing, and what that means is that the council must decide this matter solely on sworn testimony, in the sense of people providing evidence orally before the council, or written evidence. It's not a matter about which the council just has discretion to decide the matter. They have to decide this special use permit based upon the evidence in the case. The public should know that there are certain matters where only expert testimony from a qualified expert, is competent for the council to consider. And I just want to tell you that's important, because if there's purely lay testimony about whether the use of property affects the value of other property, only an expert like an appraiser can testify to that. Testimony about whether there's an increase in vehicular traffic resulting from the proposed use, that too is something that only an expert can testify about, that they can consider. And so too, matters where expert testimony is usually required in court, such as technical matters about stormwater or engineering, the council cannot consider that testimony unless it comes from an expert. So forgive me for saying that, but those are statutory requirements, and I don't want anyone misled when they provide evidence or testimony in this case. At the end of the day, finally, I'd say this, that the council is required to grant the special use permit unless it finds one of 4 things. One, that the use would materially endanger the public health or safety, or they find that it would substantially injure the value of adjoining property, or they would not be in harmony with the area, or that the use would not be in conformity with our various land use plans. But if all of those are met by the evidence, the council has no discretion. Please understand, they are obligated under those circumstances then to grant the special use permit. The final thing I will say about that is that, and Mr. Roop will allude to that, this is for you, council members in particular, that the staff report does contain, and Mr. Roop will discuss this, certain matters about which you need to hear testimony in order to find that the proposed use complies with various provisions of the ordinance. And that's sort of rare that we've ever had that kind of circumstance, so I alert you to it. But it's in the staff report. Those are in addition to the 4 fundamental kind of standards that we've talked about. Finally, members of the public, the council is permitted, if it grants a special use permit, to impose certain kinds of conditions upon the use, but those conditions can't just be anything. They have to be reasonably tailored to the standards that they are applying the evidence to. Okay, so I just hope that helps the public with that. Any questions, members of council?
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Appreciate it. Staff, yeah, there's Marty. Hi, Marty.
Hello again. Good evening. Okay, thanks, Nick. I do have a presentation, relatively brief, and we'll just get started. Special use permit A for South Green Mixed Use Project. This is the vicinity map. Everyone present probably knows where this is, but it's down at the bottom of the hill going down South Greensboro Street where the roundabout is, and lots 1 and 3 are already developed and exist. So we're really, we're talking about the whole project, but we're really going to focus primarily on lot 2. Oh, thank you,
Mayor,
Nick.
Mayor,
Yes.
excuse me. Marty needs to be sworn in.
Oh, Marty, you didn't know that?
We just slipped right past it.
Oh, come on up here, Marty, and get sworn or affirmed. Mr. Joyner
And
will do
anybody else
that.
who might want to testify, you want to do it all at once?
Yeah, we can do it all at once. Whoever is
Whoever
gonna
wants to testify.
give expert
Has to be under oath?
testimony. Any subject matter experts? Oh, we got a bunch of them.
If you plan on talking, even if you're not sure and you may.
Just
decide
do it
not to
anyway.
what you want, just please come up.
Thank you, Mr. Joyner.
Thank you. Can you raise your right hand? And after I read the oath, just say I do. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to provide is the truth to the best of your knowledge?
I do. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. Just jumped right in. And I'll jump right back in. So primarily we are here to discuss Lot 2 and what the current application wants to build there, but I do have the whole vicinity map here just showing the whole of the project. And I just have some quick aerial images just to make sure everyone knows where we're talking about. You see Lot 1 on the left and Lot 3 on the right, and Lot 2 as you zoom in as the green space at the rear of the site. Just a few facts. I won't be too long-winded here, but the project was conditionally rezoned to M3 conditional zoning, and up to 63 dwelling units were allowed, as well as an additional 5,300 square feet of commercial space. The total number of units, just to make note of it, may fluctuate over time as the ground floor of the front-facing building may or may not be used for commercial use. So there will be at least 57 and up to 63 dwelling units, depending on how the front's commercial spaces are used. 3 total parcels, and the public right-of-way comprised altogether is about 5.73 acres. You may recall that as I said, lots 1 and 3 are already built. This was originally approved for an SUPA several years back, and there were 47 conditions attached to that permit. The request at this time from the applicant is to simply leave all 47 in place. I did, as written in the staff report, I noted edit a few of them to make it contemporary with respect to what's proposed now, but the bulk of the 47 remain exactly as written. Size-limited homes are required. Almost all the units by their nature are small and comply. but they are required. And the 15% affordable housing goal of the town will be met through either including units on the site or doing a payment in lieu or a combination thereof. We do have a condition that requires that the payment be brought forth to the town before a building permit is issued, but as you may hear through testimony later from the applicant, they're still working on the possibility of getting one or more units into the building. Plans demonstrate LUO compliance, land use ordinance compliance, subject to the proposed conditions. So the original 47 are there, and then I've added a handful more, 7 or 8 more. And let me keep moving. Lamar, this seems to be stuck from, looks like you were doing something on, oh, there it goes. It just stalled for a second. The overall site plan, this does just show all 3 lots with a hash mark around lot 2. And then I'm zoomed in here to lot 2. And if you can follow the cursor. So South Greensboro Street is over here. And if you're heading to the east, you basically enter the site straight away as you're going down 2 Hills Drive. And there's parking immediately as you enter, and then kind of wrapped in between the buildings here. Roberson Place subdivision to the right, the storage area to the south, and the Lincoln Center and Chapel Hill jurisdiction over to the east. We can refer back to this if needed if we get into the details of the site plan. For now, I just wanted to have some plan sheets here and available for reference. You've already heard one comment about landscaping. Perhaps we will get back to that. So I do have the proposed landscaping plan available here for reference as well. The grading plan, again, for reference. We do have the town engineer as well as the project engineer both here tonight if you have questions about stormwater engineering or grading, anything of that nature. I do have some architectural renderings just pulled for the plan and presented for the record with respect to what the project architecture looks like. And they probably have some colored renderings of this, so I'm just kind of establishing for the record what's in the plans. Multiple buildings proposed, some 4-story, some 3-story, and this is another view. And with that, as Nick mentioned, I do have a few matters that I just want to kind of highlight here quickly. And then the applicant and myself and their engineer had a meeting today, so I know they are queued up to provide some testimony to you about certain conditions. The allowance for 40% restaurant uses, which was established with the original SUP, is back before you tonight as a new request with the residential component added to that. So they are proposing to utilize the same performance measures that they did with the original SUP, permeable pavement, things of that nature that are outlined in the staff report and in condition 41, in exchange for 40% restaurant uses and residential use of the property. So they will be providing some testimony about that. Council does need to make a finding if you find 181 parking spaces sufficient. You do need to make a finding that is sufficient to serve the development. The DLA, that's Downtown Livability Area, for anyone in the audience that may not know that acronym, is proposed here in lieu of what would typically in a more outside of the downtown suburban setting be a 40% open space requirement. So they're proposing to do downtown livability area, and they'll provide some testimony based on that about that topic as well. I showed you very briefly the architectural renderings. They are asking for alternative approval of the architectural standards because they don't meet all 6 of the standards. This is a pretty standard request. It was approved with the original SUP related to the buildings that are there now, and just needs to be found again as acceptable with respect to the newly proposed buildings. I do have available here, just for reference, the conditions that were placed on the conditional zoning. If we need to get into any discussion of that, I just wanted to have them available for reference. And the staff recommended conditions and the advisory board recommendations, I've cut them into pieces here so that hopefully they are reasonably legible to folks in the audience. And again, this is just a bunch of different slides. There's 47 original, this being the last one. And then we have 48 through 54 as the new conditions, and then a few from the advisory boards. I will back up, with that said, to the site plan, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time. Otherwise, we can transition over to the applicant for their presentation.
Thank you, Marty. Any questions for Marty right now before he leaves the podium, or we'll wait? I'll wait. Wait? Great, thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
So we can hear from the applicant at this time.
Thank you. Mark Mosier from Legacy. I'm the project developer. Brought with me expert testimony, as Marty alluded to. Drew Howe is our project engineer, stormwater expert, did all the engineering.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can you move real close because
Sure.
folks at home? Thank you.
Okay. And Ty, if you want to come introduce yourself. I was going to ask Ty, who is a licensed appraiser, to testify first. His findings are the impact analysis requirement on the property values and the harmony. And he is from Greensboro, so Nick, I don't know if he needs to stick around after he testifies. He can, okay. But we can just let him know if he's free to go or if he has to stay. Thank you.
Is this Kirkland Appraisals?
Yes.
Yes.
It's-
This
it's-
is you.
Yeah, the appraisal is in the report submitted.
Yes, you
Got
all
it.
should have the report. I'm Alan W. Sutton Jr., nickname's Ty. Principal with Sutton Shively Appraisals out of Greensboro. I've been appraising for 30 years. Happy anniversary. I hold the MAI, SRA, and AI GRS designations from the Appraisal Institute. They require significant additional review, education requirements, and national testing. Governed by USPAP, the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, which requires me to be objective, impartial, and independent. I have reviewed the impact study for the proposed South Green lots at 120 Two Hills Drive in Carrboro, which was prepared by Kirkland Appraisals, LLC. The analysis relies upon accepted appraisal methodologies as well as interviews and research, which are referenced in the report, which you have. I accept the conclusions as supported and reasonable given the data and analysis presented. I concur with Mr. Kirkland's opinion that the proposed development and/or use will be in harmony with the scale, bulk, coverage, density, and character of the neighborhood in which it's located. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but everything should be outlined in the report for you.
I see no hands up, so no questions for you at this time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for that. Next up?
Nick, do you want to stay for a little bit?
Madam Mayor, he would be free to go, given no questions from you, but if there's anyone else who's going to testify that wants to cross-examine him, they have the right to do that.
Right.
So you might want to ask if there's anybody else.
He's okay if he does stay, but it's just, if he's not.
I would probably say stay, at least through the end of the public hearing. We just don't know what may come up. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Drew Howe. I'm with Ballantyne Associates. We are the lead civil design firm on this project. As Marty alluded to, there are, I believe, 54 conditions for the approval of our zoning request. Obviously, I'm not going to go through every single one of those, but Marty did ask us to speak in a little greater detail on a few of those. Just a little bit of general information about the project. This is also a rendering. If you're looking straight at the project, this would be Building 2A on the plans with residential in the top 3 floors, potentially some commercial on the bottom floor there, potentially some additional residential units.
That would be the view from the existing South Green retail areas, looking at the first building you would see.
Please use the microphone.
Sorry. That, that building is a view from probably like where Carrboro, where the glass place is now, in the current Phase 1 retail.
Sorry, Chief. No, you're okay. Marty didn't ask us to specifically talk about this, but one of our requirements was we had to meet a certain percentage of size-limited units. In other words, the units had to be under a certain percentage of the units had to be under, I believe it's 1,100 square feet, and then an additional percentage had to be under 1,300 square feet. We did list those out on our plans. It's in the site data table on the front cover sheet. But really, I just wanted to point out, as you can see on one of the floor plans, that I believe something like 90% of the units meet that requirement as it is, and we simply listed the ones out just to, go through that formality. So this is, I believe, in regards to condition 51, which is, let me get the verbiage exactly right. Essentially a request by the applicant to use the downtown livability area requirements in lieu of the 40% open space requirements. This was a part of the original zoning, and we're just asking that to be continued. For this one, that requirement as per ordinance is that we must provide an area that meets certain characteristics listed in the ordinance, that is 10% of the overall site area, and I've got this highlighted in green. This is the courtyard area, if you will, between buildings 2B and 2C, and include a dog park, an outdoor games area, a covered seating area with a grill and conversation area, multiple community gardens, as well as an outdoor dog wash. And then, as you can kind of see in the background here, the area will be well planted as well. As far as the numbers go, obviously these calculations are on our plans, but I think the 10% comes out to be about 6,500 square feet. And additionally to that, as each of the individual facets of the downtown livability area or urban amenities, the total construction costs of those added up need to be around or meet 7% of the total assessed land value. So that's what I've provided here is that calculation. And just a rendering of that area. To the right is, I believe, I'm actually turned around a little bit. Yeah, it's building 2C. No.
2B to the right, 2C
Yeah.
to the left.
So 2B is to your right, and then down kind of further in the corner to the right is a covered parking area on the first floor. Straight ahead would be building 2C, and of course in the foreground are the aforementioned downtown livability area.
Is 2C, is that the clubhouse? Is that a, 2C?
On the bottom floor with residential units.
Yeah, there are both. So it's on the bottom floor of the clubhouse area, community room, co-working
got it.
space, fitness room, all of that. And then the floors above that would also have some residential units. Yeah, this is not something that it is one of the conditions. I'm not sure which one of those right in front of me, but Mark can talk about it a little bit in greater detail.
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out a way to meet the 15% affordable. We know at a minimum that we've committed to making the payment in lieu, but what we'd really like to do, and we've expressed this before, is work with some of the community agencies that provide affordable housing to figure out a way for them to be able to get some of the units. And that means instead of our payment in lieu, can we source, or can they source some of the gap funding that would be needed to go from the price that some of these agencies can put together up to the price that it would need to be, even at our discounted rate for the affordable units. That there is a gap in that funding. There is a Carrboro affordable housing fund. Some of that can be used. So we're having ongoing conversations about how we can make those work. So Marty alluded in his earlier presentation that we're having these conversations and we're working towards it. But he also mentioned that we are required to make the payment in lieu when the building permits are issued. So we're going to make the full payment, and then we've all agreed that if we can accomplish getting some affordable units in there, somehow we will refund or credit us back the payments that we made in exchange for the units that actually ended up on the ground. So that's what we're trying to do. I can, if I've made that more confusing, I'm happy to
No, I think
explain it more.
I think I'm understanding that you would need to go ahead and pay that flat rate of that payment in lieu per the town's 2024 fee schedule.
Right.
And then you would continue to work to find a third-party
Yeah.
agency that could provide that gap funding.
That's exactly right. You said it much better than I did.
No, I understood. I understood what you were saying. The units are more important than the payment in lieu. I mean, always. So I would just ask that, to continue to work with those third-party agencies and see, what we can get out of it. The units are more important than the payment in lieu.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
we agree. Whether it's 2 units, 4 units, 6 units, it's better than none.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. Councilmember Sujay. Oh, Councilmember Frey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So let me make sure that I've understood this fully. So our ordinance requires you to make whatever payment in lieu you're going to make before you get the building permit. You can't actually finish the sale of the units as affordable units until they're built. So you're stuck because you have to make the payment in lieu before you can know for sure how many you can move. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Out of curiosity, do you know how they handle this in Chapel Hill where they use their ordinance? Are those units, I'm thinking of organizations like, as an example, the Community Home Trust, are those units being pledged and built and transferred to the Community Home Trust rather than being sold by the developer? Is there something else that they're doing in Chapel Hill that's making that work?
If it's a community home trust unit, it ends up in a land trust owned by Community Home Trust, and then they find the buyer. Yeah, and that model is still potentially open. We're in communications with Community Home Trust, seeing if we can do that. But it's the big issue so far has been a little bit of the gap financing that they need to fill, and what would the source of that be?
Gotcha. So
That's-
is there anything in Carrboro's ordinance, and feel free to defer back to Marty if you need to, is there anything in Carrboro's ordinance that prevents you from going that route should you and Community Home Trust or some other organization come to an agreement?
I don't think so. You want to?
No, I've written the condition to allow for that type of flexibility or change at a later date, specifically referring to 1564 in the ordinance, where we would deem that, presumably if it was what I will characterize as for the better, an actual unit on the ground, an insignificant deviation, which wouldn't necessarily even need to come back to you for approval. We would just handle it at the staff level. To back up a half step there to the question about building permit versus certificate of occupancy. In the past, we have pushed that out as far as we can, as I think maybe your logic was where you were going with that. There was a change at the state level to our statutes that prohibits a municipality, and I'm not going to speak very eloquently about this, but it prohibits a municipality from attaching something like that to the receiving of a certificate of occupancy. So we've backed it up to the building permit for that reason.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? about the housing? So I assume that it's a significant amount of money that we're talking about here for for the gap. I assume that it probably will be, although not sure exactly how much. Is that correct? It's going to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no exact numbers, but in meeting with both Community Home Trust and Empowerment Inc., we're probably looking at somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 of gap
Yeah,
in
that's what I was-
each unit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that number.
I should also mention just that Anne Marie is in the back room if you have questions for her.
Yeah, I did. I have I want to know, is the payment in lieu, is that would be for one unit? Is that correct? Or,
It would be for all the units.
okay,
So it's a significant amount because each unit's 42,000 and change, I think. So
Okay.
it's close to $400,000.
oh, well,
Yeah.
that's pretty significant.
Yeah. So I'd love to make it later.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. So, and try to work on it, but I think we're gonna get hung up on that.
Well, that's
So
okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. I just want to know about the amount of the gap.
Yeah.
Anything else on this, council members, affordable housing? I think he explained it pretty well. Thank you.
And I'll just touch on a couple more items, a couple more of the conditions that Marty laid out that he wanted us to at least talk briefly about. One of those is condition 41, which was a condition that was a part of the original zoning. We're simply asking for the same condition to be applied to Lot 2, so that we can have the 40% restaurant use and also residential use as a part of the development. I think in the condition there are 9 or so listed performance measures that we must meet, some of which we already have met based on lots 1 and 3, and some of which we are meeting or have proposed that we are going to meet. Parking spaces proposed, that total was also listed as a part of the original zoning. It was essentially kind of a negotiation, if you will, based on some other facets of the project. And then that total number came out to be, I think there was a range in the original permit, but we are at or right above that range with the additional Lot 2 parking. And so that's basically, the number that we're providing. I believe the only other item is alternative compliance with the downtown architectural standards. As a part of the original zoning request, we requested to deviate from those standards. And I believe and we're asking to do the same for Lot 2. I believe that only 1 or 2 of those we technically aren't meeting, one of which is we've got parking in front of the front facade of the first building. And the other one, sorry, I cannot remember that right off the top, but.
Percentage of glass.
Yeah, I think it's like percentage of glass, perhaps. But there have been discussions about the architectural representation of the buildings and what we're providing there, and I think everybody's pleased with the final result. There may be additional conditions, I'm not sure procedurally, that we have to orally speak to. If there are, I'd be glad to speak on those. But in lieu of that, I guess we can get to questions.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Are there questions, council members?
Madam Mayor, I have a quick one.
Oh, go right ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A quick question. So when the SUPA was originally approved, we required residential parking. Residential parking is no longer required. Did you happen to run the numbers on what the new required amount would be, given that it's just for the commercial?
Yes, so I believe we needed 5 spaces per unit that we had based on the square footages of the proposed commercial units. So we would have had about 30 commercial spaces.
And when you add that to the number of spaces already existing in lots 1 and 3, what do you come up with? I guess what I'm asking is 181 significantly in excess of what we actually require?
No, I guess that's a hard, sorry.
Yeah.
I guess that's a kind of a difficult question to answer because the residential, you guys have moved towards a maximum count as opposed to a minimum count. I believe that's 2 parking spaces per unit is the maximum amount, or maybe it's 2 per bedroom. We're well under that. So it kind of plays with the number a little bit. We are obviously above what would be required simply because it's now a maximum requirement as opposed to a minimum. So really our only minimum requirements would have to do with the commercial spaces. And so we're well above that, but we're also well below if you factor in the maximum amount.
Thanks. I think what I'm getting at here is I want to make sure that you're not building more parking than you feel like you need now that the ordinance has adjusted to allow you to right-size that.
So in our market study and talking to our sales and marketing team, we have one member of them here. We felt really strongly that we needed to have at least, or be able to commit 1 space per residential unit. So if that turns out to be 57, and then we still, we don't know who the commercial users would be. So if we knew we were going to be required to have somewhere around 30 spaces for the commercial, we basically took our 57 and our 30, and we knew we wanted to be somewhere around the 87 number, and we're at 86.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Frey. Councilmember Merrill.
I just had a question. And maybe I'm misremembering this, but in the presentation, the joint board presentation on Thursday, I recall that you said the commercial use would specifically not be restaurant, which seems to be, this is saying up to 40% restaurant. So I'm just wondering which is accurate.
To clarify that, we just wanted to make sure we're not going to have restaurants in Lot 2 in these buildings. Architecturally, it's really difficult to have restaurants and vent them and do all that kind of stuff. So we are not going to have any restaurants. The reason we have to write that was because we wanted to make sure we were keeping the 40% that was approved in the original SUP.
For the whole.
For the whole thing, and we didn't want to change that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
The other thing I would say about parking is that I think we're required to have 3 EV spaces, and we're looking at doing probably quite a bit more. We may have, 8 to 12. And we're working with some users so that, and other people can do it. It won't be any kind of proprietary. It'll be something where if somebody has an account with ChargePoint or somebody, they can come and charge their vehicle there.
Could I throw in 2 cents?
Go ahead.
I don't know what position we're in to make a condition, but I would encourage you to at least put in the infrastructure for more spaces down the road. Not the actual chargers, but at least put in the conduit before you pave the lot, all that sort of stuff. Just make it easy, make it easier on everybody down the road as these get adopted.
We are ahead of you on that one.
Yeah.
More presentation?
Marty brought to my attention there was one of the conditions that I did need to speak to. As regarding the utility serviceability letters. I don't remember which condition that was, but essentially I just need to tell you that I have zero doubt that we're going to receive service from all utility providers that we have shown on our plans. It is sometimes a little tricky to get a hold of those letters, or I should say get in touch with the right person at these large utility companies to get those, but I've got a couple, and we will definitely, once we receive all of those, get those over to staff.
Sounds good.
Madam Mayor, quick question.
Councilmember Frey.
Just for the record, that's condition 50. So to put this into lay terms, basically, not all of the utilities have given you the letters yet. You obviously can't actually get a certificate of occupancy without the utility. So this condition is just saying, yeah, we'll get that timely when we need it.
Correct.
Okay.
And that time, I think the condition is that we have to have those before final construction approval through the staff. So that definitely will happen, and of course, as it sits, Duke Energy is out there. They put in temporary service. We've worked with OWASA on their design, so it's not a matter of if, it's just more of a matter of getting a hold of that piece of paper.
Thanks for helping me translate.
Is there anyone to talk about the stormwater erosion control, or is there anyone to speak to that?
I can speak to it if you have specific questions, or you want me
Yeah,
to just
I
kind of go
don't-
over it generally? Or?
Yeah, just generally, just to, kind of describe how things are gonna go out there as it
Sure.
relates to stormwater and erosion control.
Yeah, so on the stormwater front, we are proposing permeable pavement system as our main control measure. That both acts as a detention area for quantity of water, and it also acts as a treatment for water quality. Part of the original discussions around the original permit was the idea that the Carrboro was really pro permeable pavement, especially in an area that has been discussion of a lot of standing water in certain times. So that was part of it. So we were already going to look to do that no matter what. But basically, how that works is you've got regular brick pavers, but instead of having any kind of mortar or joint filler between them, you have rock, and then you have some permeable rock layers beneath with a perforated PVC pipe underneath that. So the idea is water infiltrates straight down as it hits the parking lot, and also is put in through the roof leaders from the building. It's stored there. Some will infiltrate naturally down through the ground. The amount that does not gets pulled out through that PVC pipe and ultimately ties into the 7-foot by 6-foot box culvert that is currently adjacent to the site. On erosion control note, we already have our land disturbance permit through Orange County. That was part of an earlier minor modification so that we could go ahead and get started on some dirt moving. So they're out there performing some of that work already. But yeah, we have that land disturbance permit, and there's certain requirements, obviously through Orange County, that need to be met along the way to ensure that we're in compliance there.
Okay, sounds good. And then Councilmember Haven O'Donnell has a question or two.
I have a follow-up regarding the permeable pavement, Drew, and that is, how will the town, assess the viability of that mechanism over time? Let's say in the first 3 years, first 5 years.
So we are required to provide an operations and maintenance agreement, which basically says our owner or any, I'm blanking on the word, but yeah, any condo association or HOA, if you will, agrees legally to provide that maintenance. And that maintenance schedule is mostly put forth by the state, by NCDEQ, on what is required to do there. With permeable pavement, it's essentially you're every so often cleaning out that top layer of soot that naturally aggregates there. So that's really the biggest thing is to clean out that top layer every 6 months, every year, or something like that. But short answer to your question is that we provide an operations and maintenance agreement.
And is it based, and I don't remember this from the presentations that I've seen, are the permeable pavers based on a 25-year flood regulation, or what year regulation?
So we were required to show that it detained the 25-year storm.
And given what we know about climate change and that the regulations really should be up to a minimum of 100 years, how does that meet the need?
I would say it's really less about the year. It's about keeping those numbers up to date. I do think they update those those numbers. It's NOAA who puts those rainfall numbers out for a given area. I do think they update them every 3 or 4 years, but ultimately we can only design based on the numbers that we have today.
I think some of the culverts can handle more, right?
Yeah, I mean, the adjacent box culvert that was put in as a part of Phase 1 to help remediate some of the issues that were previously being had in that area was designed for the 100-year storm. It is supposed to carry the 100-year storm through that, so.
That's in phase 1.
Yeah, and it runs, it runs along the western property boundary of Lot 2.
Right.
And then, of course, it goes down South Greensboro Street. But ultimately, that will pull the water, away from that area, if nothing else.
No.
Yeah. Councilmember Palmer.
Thank you. So, as a follow-on to the stormwater question there, I noticed on page 8 of the staff report, it mentioned, it said a discussion related to a SEM located on the north end of Lot 2, and I'm assuming that's a stormwater control measure. Is that what that stands for there?
So an SEM does stand for stormwater
Okay.
control measure.
And I went digging for that. Thank you for the very detailed attachment C. But I'm not a planner. I'm not an engineer. So to the extent that you could speak to, what is that stormwater control measure? Why is there a discussion about that?
So I did see your email with the questions come through, and I did respond to those at least on a cursory level. I'd be glad to speak with you more if need be to clarify some things. But I think that was just a nomenclature issue in the report itself. That's referring to that inlet/culvert area, which is not technically an SEM. It's not technically a stormwater control measure. It is an inlet to a box culvert. It's more of a conveyance than it is a control measure. That is an issue that we are working on, aside the overall development with the town of Carrboro. We've had several meetings and are going to propose some potential alternatives to help clean that area up a little bit.
So as a follow-up to that, then, the idea is that this development in Lot 2 would meet its required level by diverting into the box culvert, which currently drains through, is it Lot 3? Which way does that go?
So it starts just to the north of Lot 2. That is where the ephemeral stream comes through, intermittent stream comes through and is picked up. And then it kind of runs along the greenway there and eventually out along Greensboro Street. Just to clarify though, our detention system on site will handle/detain the required 25-year storm. I only mentioned the box culvert as, kind of an extra thing to help move that water along. And that was done a little bit separately as a part of the first phase.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmer. Any other questions?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Frey.
Just to make sure that, because I don't know if I've got all of the same thread that Councilmember Palmer is talking about. Is this referring to the fact that when the intermittent stream really gets going, a lot of debris washes up at the top of that conveyance, potentially blocking the inlet there? Okay, great. Thank you. Wanted to make sure I understood the topic.
Yeah, just very quickly, the staff perspective on that. I did inadvertently identify it as an SEM, and it's really just an inlet. And yes, to what you're saying, the bars clog up the debris, so we're trying to find a solution to that, just staff perspective.
Is there more information to share? Was this your last slide, pretty much?
Yeah, pretty much. It's just kind of a summary of the 4 findings and questions.
I think everybody, no questions?
I actually have a couple of quick other ones. And Mark, feel free to answer this in joint with Marty or figure out, as long as the two of you agree on what the answer is. I don't really, it doesn't matter which one of you answers it. I wanted to come back to conditions 44 and 45, which have to do with making an offer to the owners of various adjacent properties about screening and planting and so on. I wanted to make sure, were all of those conditions previously met, or are there any of those that are still pending performance?
Those have been satisfied, and it was an unusual situation as a major modification. So my choice was just to leave them in place, but yes, they have been satisfied, yes.
My other question had to do with condition 47, which is about nuisance impacts, simply because we have had a few reports. Marty, I think you had a discussion during the joint review of the planning board, and heard some reports of a nuisance impact issue. So I just wanted to check with you, Marty. Has the town received the required written reports around nuisance impacts and pickup?
We have not, and yes, me and, I don't believe Gary is here tonight. Gary Hill is not here tonight, but me and Mark have been talking about that, just that there may be, by way of that condition, assuming for the moment that council approves the permit, a renewed commitment to do that, because we have not. There was discussion as the review was ongoing, and I don't want to speak for Gary Hill, but in his absence tonight, about how he had offered an email list of some sort and no one had signed up. And that's paraphrasing at best, and I hope not mischaracterizing what I heard. But yes, perhaps a renewed commitment to try again and make that happen.
So to dig a little deeper on that, would it be fair to say that if the owner, I know that the owner of all three lots is not the same person.
Right.
But do I understand that because they are sharing an SUPA, that if the owner of lots 1 and 3 doesn't catch up on written reports about nuisance impacts, that has the potential to block permits and other things from moving forward for lot 3?
Yes, since Mark is
For
here
lot 2,
tonight.
sorry, thank you.
Since Mark is here tonight, perhaps he would want to speak to that, but in our conversation earlier today, I did make that clear that it involves him as well now. So do you want to say anything about it?
I would like to say I wish it didn't involve me.
I know. Yeah.
So, and we're building residential. So obviously the nuisance that people are not happy with would probably be pretty important to us as well. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know all the background on it, but we are certainly open to, digging into it and understanding what we have to do to make everybody be in compliance. I would like to think that this would not be something that would stop or give pause to the Lot 2 approval.
Yeah, I think it's honestly, folks, it's for my colleagues, at least from my point of view, it's less about the approval and more about this is a risk on the project, because if it's not met, it may interfere with later phases.
Right.
And so to follow up with that, the difficulties that we have heard about, some in joint review, are related to noise at late hours and things of that nature. So we're talking about, I want to understand that a little more. So we're talking about 1 and 3, potentially existing issues, not directly tied to Lot 2, but you may be inheriting some of that by way of number 47. So I want to understand that a little better, either you or Marty or whomever.
My understanding, I've read 47 and read the hours that you're allowed to collect garbage or cause noise and all that, and I agree with those hours. I don't want anybody doing anything outside those hours either. Mm-hmm. I don't know to what extent I can have control over what vendors on Lot 1 and Lot 3 are doing.
This is what I was trying to get at.
That's a little concerning for me, but I'm certainly willing to jump in and give everybody my opinion and do what I can do.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate it. Marty, did you have something? And then Councilmember Merrill, I see you.
Sure. Well, yeah, I would just kind of reiterate that it would essentially be a shared ownership of this permit, assuming approval.
Oh.
So the burden kind of is shared, and I'll stop there. That's all we're really trying to say in terms of Mark being involved.
Got it.
There have been some instances over the 5, 6, 7, 8 years, however long the tenants have been there, some instances I have heard of sporadically about noise, in particular when Carrboro was there, that there were, people outside making noise late at night and that type of thing. For an immediate, I'm perhaps repeating some of what I said during joint reviews. I'll try to be succinct. For an immediate situation like that, it is always best to call the police as a noise complaint, a simple noise complaint. With respect to the permit condition and the more longer-term compliance matter, that is a zoning matter, not a police matter. So I will be working with Gary and Mark to ensure that there is compliance, and we, the staff, may hear from some of the neighbors directly following joint review and following the discussion tonight.
Yeah, and so it is shared, is what you just said. So everybody's just kind of involved in it.
Yeah, and I
Right.
just mean the ownership group.
Okay.
Mark is now a party to that as the
Okay.
owner of Lot 2. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Merrill?
That answered my question.
Oh, okay.
Madam Mayor, quick follow-up. Marty, in your experience, is it unusual to have multiple lots with different owners involved in a single SUP? I'm just wondering how often it's happened that we have conditions that apply to people who may not be able to effectuate them.
It's very common with respect to residential subdivisions. Obviously, you have many owners once the project is built. With respect to a commercial project, it is not unheard of, but somewhat unusual. I might compare it to 300 East Main, where similar or perhaps larger actual acreage there, but there's one owner. The town is dealing with one owner there. What is different here and what enabled Mark to become a party is that the property was subdivided, so there are 3 lots. And so Lot 1 or Lot 2 could be sold separately in the future as well. So that's a little unusual.
All right, thanks for the context.
You're welcome.
I'm good now.
Councilmember Palmer, you have anything? Okay. I think there are no more questions from council. So you may take your seats. I think there are some members of the public that may want to speak from earlier, keeping in mind Town Attorney Herman's information about the nature of this public hearing and how we can actually not take into account layperson testimony. But you're more than welcome. It's not like we're not listening. I mean, So I can go back to the list if you want to come back up, sir. Mr. Joyner? This is Mr. Joyner. Come on up. Robert Joyner.
Before I start my time, I just wanted to give my qualifications.
Okay. Yeah, do that.
My name is Robert Joyner. I'm a registered professional engineer with the state of North Carolina. I've been a practicing engineer, development engineer since 1993. I've worked for John R. McAdams, O'Brien Gear, on various development parcels. My current occupation is with the City of Durham in charge of development review. I'm the senior engineering manager for that, for all infrastructure, water, sewer, storm, roads, dry utilities, etc., on public and private property, up to a point outside the building.
Thank you for that.
And I have been there for 24 years in that capacity now.
Thank you.
In this particular issue, I wanted to talk about a couple of things. One of those was that we appreciate the developer providing that screening. We'd like to talk to the developer about possibly moving some of that plantings or screenings a little bit closer, or adding a few more trees, which was a part of the original conditions of approval. And we do appreciate the developer for adhering to those already, and we'd just like to have a few conversations for those neighbors immediately adjacent. The other aspects were, we do understand and we appreciate as a residential component, there'll be interested in some of the issues that have been with the noise complaints and stuff like that. But so far, the police have been responsive to that based on knowledge that I have in that regard. So we do appreciate the town and the police department for responding to those items outside of hours. I know they're busy, but we appreciate their efforts. I'm available for any questions. I've been in Robertson Place since 1999.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay. Well, I
Thank you.
appreciate your comments. Thank you. Town Attorney Herman, based on Mr. Joyner's qualifications that he revealed to us, how does that impact how we perceive any information? I think he basically was just appreciating a couple of issues that the developer is taking care of or will take care of, but he did preface that with qualifications.
Yeah, excuse me, I think his qualifications were a context of who he was.
Okay,
But then his testimony wasn't really related to any particular.
got it. Yeah, it was just okay, got it. Thank you for that. Is this Matt? You okay, Mr. Jordy?
Yeah, I don't have anything further to add unless Rob or, I know Tommy wanted to say something.
Is that Dr. Kuntz?
Yes, the sign-up list was on President.
That's okay. Come on up, Dr. Kuntz.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name's Tommy Kuntz. I live in Robertson Place at 212 Purple Leaf. I've been there since 2003. My property is the most immediately adjacent to the development that pre-existed and that is going on now. I just have a couple of requests or perhaps conditions. I'm pleased that we are reaffirming the conditions that were in the original agreement. I do ask that we consider the one specifically regarding screening. I understand that it has been met, but the conditions of that were specifically along the border between our property and Lot 1 and did not provide for any screening between the property of Robertson Place and my property and the new development of Lot 2. So I would appreciate if there were more conditions or renewal of that condition to allow for increased screening. There are direct sight lines into all of the front-facing windows of our home, including our children's bedroom windows, that will certainly be impacted by 2- and 3-story buildings. The other condition that I am pleased is being reaffirmed is the business hours, especially for deliveries and pickups, that will not be changed. I do ask, though, that this council help, and I apologize for being selfish, me and my wife specifically, we don't know what to do when those conditions aren't met. I appreciate calling the police, but calling the police on the grease recycle truck that comes regularly at 558 doesn't feel like a good use of resources, and our current levers aren't working. And like you, I'm going to quote you, I wish I weren't involved in it either, but I am. And our current avenues are not yielding fruit, and the pre-dawn hour incursions are not going away. So some instruction on how we can be better citizens in that space and help in that would be really, really helpful.
Okay.
And then lastly, just to say gratitude and appreciation for separating this issue from a bollard discussion. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're not doing that.
Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Kuntz. Appreciate it. Any other members of the public? Yes, come on up, Lisa.
I'm Lisa Hazurjan. I live at 210 Purple Leaf Place, next door to Tommy and Robin, and directly across from the Roberson bike path. Without reopening things that we don't want to talk about, I will just say that I too appreciate at the beginning of this meeting, Council reaffirming your understanding that the safety of our neighborhood is contingent upon things remaining the way they are. So thank you for that. Members of council will find in their email the visuals of my original presentation, so you can take a look at that, and I will share them with the developer as well, because some of it had to do with suggestions about accessibility and affordability and then accountability. And so I'll try to touch on those quickly without the benefit of visual aids. Regarding accessibility, I wanted to suggest a new way of thinking about accessibility that merges ADA compliance with marketability to appeal to the widest possible audience of prospective residents. There's nothing in anything I saw about like the actual what are the bathrooms going to be like, et cetera. But I did want to put out there from my own experience that there are some simple steps that can be taken to make homes accessible in ways that carry benefits for everyone. For example, building thresholds in a way that's easier to navigate when pushing a baby stroller or with trying to get in a wheelchair. Building showers that are easy to get into and out of, whether you're recovering from an injury, lower body injury, or simply have difficulty stepping up and over. When my mom was looking for a new place, she took a measurement of how high she could step, and I found a lot of places she couldn't manage. Beyond that, and would love to hear from you all sometime about that. I did want to ask about affordability and really understanding more about what that means. I heard that the payment in lieu is about $42K per unit. I heard reference to sort of reduced rate for those, and I'm just kind of trying to understand the math. It might be a conversation for later. But last, as my time is running out, with accountability, there have been multiple times in this conversation when the sort of chicken and egg nature of things comes up. And I just want to reiterate, we really need stronger accountability so that there's recourse for both the town and residents when the conditions of the agreement aren't met, as has been the case with existing 47. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any other members of the public? Any other questions from council members? So I'm sorry.
well,
Go ahead, Councilmember Palmer.
I'm not quite sure this is a question, but
Need
just
someone to come back up.
well, no, I don't think so. And this is more to my colleagues and I suppose the public as well. And perhaps a question will come out of this for someone else. But I just wanted to note the way that several different factors sort of come together. One of those is the DLA UA bit that the developer gets to allocate less to the project if it meets several criteria. And if you pull LUO Article 13, you'll see that that's, I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but if it does A or B, it gets one thing, and if it does A and B, it gets what they got. And that includes visibility and practically available to the public. How does that interact with the understandable desire to separate parking? How does that interact with the understandable desire from the neighbors to want screening? And how do all of these things come together? And just to be super clear, I'm excited to have between 57 and 63 more residences in our town, and this is not going to impact my vote. But just thinking about how we move forward, if there's anything, if there's any ask here, but more importantly, how we think about this as we go into our LUA rewrite process, how these things interact.
So, Councilmember Palmer, is this like food for thought? Is this homework
I
for
mean,
your colleagues?
I'm asking y'all if any of y'all have a question for the developer, because I couldn't formulate one as I was doing this reading. Really, what I came down to is that it is forward-looking. It's how do we get to a better place in the future versus the process that got us here. But if anybody has something for the developer or for the residents and the neighboring properties, can better phrase my ramblings.
I think the point is really well taken in a forward-looking sense. I think most of this discussion, as most special use permits, gesture to the need to have way fewer special use permits. And I think that the integration of the DLA, that's something that we have the opportunity to address. We will get the downtown area use plan back. My understanding is with about a year's runway before we have to finalize our full LUO. And so I think removing the discrepancies that you're pointing out to make it not a matter of adjudication whether something is available to the public, and not boiling down to whether we are in the position of putting a condition. You said it wouldn't affect your vote, and I would say we're not even voting. In a real sense here,
Right.
Which is kind of the nut of, I think, some of the gently expressed and neighborly frustration in the room, and often is when we get here. So I think your point is really well taken. I don't personally see a condition that I would further put on this project, which brings us back to sort of the perpetual Sisyphean quasi-judicial place.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem now. I did want to just go back to, I know I heard Dr. Kuntz say it, and I believe I heard Lisa say it, maybe a few others about where to, put issues when they pop up so that they are best responded to. And I don't know if that's Marty or who, Marty. Because obviously we have community that doesn't feel like the way that maybe they've been going about it is necessarily the best way. And so just wanted to kind of get that out before we close up the public hearing.
Sure, I appreciate that. And this particular matter, it is a zoning matter, so you can contact me directly. I know we've spoken in the past, it's been a while. We also have a general mailbox for planning, zoning, and inspections, pzi@carrboro.nc.gov. Just so everyone is hearing that, that's a place you can send it, and we'll get it routed out to the right person so that it doesn't go to one person and they miss it for some reason or whatever the case may be. I do want to be careful with respect to something like what I alluded to earlier, a noise issue related to humans outside of a bar making noise. That really is appropriately directed to the police. But as I've heard anecdotally for the moment from Dr. Coots, that the burden has been placed on neighbors to contact service providers. 47 is specifically written, as we've all read through it and discussed tonight, to place that burden on the developer, not our neighbor. So we are the appropriate people to work with the developer to rectify that.
Thank you, Marty.
You're welcome.
So no further comments from the public, but certainly us. Yeah. Nobody?
We do have a hand.
Is there a hand?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to follow on that, and I really appreciate what you're saying.
Can you?
Microphone.
Could we ask you to, thanks.
Thank you. Speaking of accessibility, use the mic always. I appreciate what you're saying, and what I think I hear you saying is the next time, hopefully not tonight / tomorrow morning, that my next door neighbors are disturbed by ridiculously early commotion behind building 1, that, once the kids are dealt with and whatever, they should get in touch with you, and you will get in touch with the owner of that property, who has proven for the past few years to be extremely unresponsive and uncooperative. And that's, it's good that you're recognizing that it shouldn't be on individuals, but we need, as a community, we need to be able to hold people accountable for the commitments that they've made. They made a commitment as a condition of being allowed to construct that building, and they are avoiding following through on that. And so I'm bringing up, not just for Lot 2. So far, I'm very impressed with our new developer. I'm so glad you bought that. I'm excited about the housing. But just writ large, sometimes we're going to have bad players. And I just want to point out, no one else should be going through what my next door neighbors are going through ever. And whatever you all can do within the parameters of law to add some teeth to these rules, I would really encourage, because this is really ridiculous what folks are going through. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Council members' comments, and then we're gonna try to come on around. Oh, go right ahead.
Marty, so I appreciate,
Sorry,
your
Councilmember Haven
comments.
O'Donnell, could you also use the mic?
Oh, I appreciate your comments, Marty. However, you know, what changes? This is an ongoing problem. What is really in the toolkit for change?
I might lean on our town attorney with respect to what our options are, but I don't know that we're in a good position right now to respond in a very definitive manner. We might need to have some follow-up discussion amongst the staff, and either report back to you or you know, just
Yeah,
in
because
some manner.
I remember the first time we talked about this.
Yes.
And, you know, and we were pretty clear that that's something, because of the proximity. And to think that the service vehicles are still creating that kind of nuisance, so to speak, it's huge. I mean, this is, you know, over a long period of time. And not that the new site would add to that, but if it's a service provider, it may, by default, you know, be captured. So, you know, I'd really like to see that there's something that does have some teeth in it ahead of, you know, creating more space with more service needs. Thanks.
And so, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell, the direction that you're asking for is some type of report back. at some
Yeah,
point.
and Marty is suggesting that, that he's, refers to council for what is possible in the toolkit. Thanks.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem now.
Yeah, would love to build on that and echo and look to guidance from Town Manager Tony on what's appropriate and the way to direct this within the confines of our sort of procedures here. This is not, as Marty knows, the only issue before us currently about PZI-related enforcement. Good enforcement makes for good neighbors, but enforcement is resource intensive. I would really like to, I think we're aware of the situations probably that this is currently a friction issue, and I think we should get an agenda item back at some point whenever it's feasible, or a work session topic about like mechanisms of enforcement, staffing, and what is legally permissible around PZI-related infractions, because we do need that. I think probably you need that also.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you.
Now, any other comments? Councilmember Merrill.
There was just, I just wanted to, I guess, ask the question from the Transportation Board whether or not the bike parking adheres to section 15295.1, the design standards for bicycle parking, in particular, the bicycle parking in the northwest corner.
Drew and I talked about that earlier. I'll let him speak to it.
Okay, thanks.
After having read that ordinance, I believe that it does. If there is a specific part of that that someone is concerned about, I'd be glad to have that discussion. I believe there, as a part of our earlier review process, there was a little bit of concern of the location being across from the building. I would point out that we have 3 other locations for bike parking, and that parking specifically has a delineated crosswalk specific for pedestrians to use there.
Cool. All right, thanks. I just wanted to highlight that. It was a question they asked, and it wasn't obvious from the plans. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Merrill. I am going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Marty, what do you need from us? I'm looking at the recommendation, whether to approve, deny, or approve with conditions. Is this happening tonight? Do we have a slide?
I meant to mention this earlier, I do have the slide, wrong. I have the slide available with respect to what Nick talked about earlier, quasi-judicial process. What we are, if staff is at a, if council is at a point where you are ready to vote on it, it would be to give direction to staff to bring back what we call a decision document.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
Okay, because I didn't see it.
Yes.
Okay. And council members, we're okay with all the conditions that have been presented, those from the past as well as the new ones? Is that correct? Okay, so this is where we are. We're given that direction. Someone going to, is that in the form of a motion or just to give the direction that?
I'll lean on Nick if he disagrees, but I believe that is just a motion and a second and a vote to identify perhaps all 47 and then the additionals, or if you want to talk about any particular ones, now would be timely to do that.
I think everybody is okay. How many is it? It's
54 total.
54 conditions, and we're all on board with all,
And
correct?
I'm sorry if I'm interrupting.
That's okay.
I might add that some of the conditions are currently written, as Nick mentioned earlier, that the applicant provide testimony tonight, which has occurred. So if I may take the direction to be that we edit that down to an actual condition instead of stating a statement about providing testimony, I'm comfortable doing that. I just want to point that out, that the wording will slightly change for a few of them.
Okay. Is there a motion? Once town council close the vote, someone to approve the following standards must be considered. Who is?
There.
Specifically about the condition that was interpreted as fulfilled that I spoke to.
Which condition number is that? Is that the screening?
Yeah.
50, was it 50?
That was an earlier one. It was part of the first 47.
Do you have that on the slide,
Yes,
Marty?
let me find my way to
I thought
that.
it was 50-something.
One more.
Was it?
I thought it was
It's not
51 or
41?
52.
Is it 44?
44 right there.
Oh, is it 44?
44 is the one on South Greensboro
Oh, okay,
Street.
sorry.
45 is
Okay,
the one
okay.
related to the neighboring property.
Oh, at 212.
So that spoke specifically to the border between one and our property. Now there's a new border being developed.
So it needs to include lot.
So it's a modification to number 45.
I have a quick question about this.
Councilmember Frey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's not clear to me that 212 Purple Leaf Place has a border with Lot 2 because it's on the other side of the street. So Lot 1 was right next door.
Not a clear border.
Lot 2 is across the street and back.
Right, so it would impact the sightlines for the property that Robertson Place owns.
Can you just move to the microphone, Dr. Koontz, so we can get a very,
So either screening in the front of our yard or on the part of the street, the walkway that Robertson Place owns across the street next to the sidewalk, screening there would interrupt the direct sight lines into our home, whether it's in our yard or across the
what
street
he
in
was
that green
talking about
space.
earlier.
Right, so it doesn't have to be 212 Purple Leaf, it could be 212 Purple Leaf / Robertson homeowners. But none of the previous screening that was provided in this condition addresses this new
has been
development.
impacted.
Right.
Yep. Thank you.
Robert Joyner, just to be clear, there are actually two screenings that were shown on the original plan. One was this condition here, which was between Lot 1 and Dr. Kuntz's house. The second one was actually screening that was shown on the original plan, on the opposite side of Robertson Place facing this. But I believe the developer has actually added that screening to be shown on their property, nearer to the building,
Okay.
just for clarity.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan.
I was just going to say, if we pull up our landscape plan, we have plantings shown.
That would be accommodating to,
I,
you believe it would?
I mean, in my, yeah.
45.
I believe it would. We're a little bit limited over there also because there is an OWASA easement over there, and it's very limited on what OWASA lets us plant inside an easement.
So
But
are
if you see the cursor, we planted this fairly heavily. That's the box culvert, which we can't plant inside that area there. And so we've got this pretty heavy. And the easement, this faint line there is the OWASA line, and I think it's 15 feet on each side. Is the easement. I think it's a 30-foot easement. I might need my expert Drew to tell me if I'm right. Am I? So this line, and I wouldn't have any trouble if we could. I mean, we would do more if we could plant inside there, but I don't think we can.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, that line to the property line is ultimately the OWASA easement. You also have to consider that there are 2 stormwater maintenance access easements that were put in as part of that phase to the north of the entry to the box culvert, and then you have a jurisdictional stream that has buffer regulations associated with that. So we're putting trees where we can.
And so you're saying you've gone as far as you can with the screenings and things, but because of the OWASA easement?
Correct. And I think that what the last gentleman alluded to, the engineer alluded to, is that we did include the plantings in our plan. So I think that's what he was saying. Which is all this through here.
So,
Councilmember Palmer, go ahead, and then Councilmember Haven O'Donnell.
and I just want to get clarity because I feel like there was a little ambiguity of whether the request was for, like in some other conditions, for funding for screen on outside, on the homeowner side, versus asking the developer to do something on their side.
Right.
Right. And that was done the first time.
Yeah.
Councilmember Haven O'Donnell, did you?
Yeah, I was just going to come behind and say the same thing, that, since there's not adequate space to put it on site, maybe put it in the neighborhood, which was what was done with Lot 1.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not clear on where it would be or how much it would be, so I'm hesitant to give it a blanket yes, but I'm open certainly to that discussion.
I would just defer to what Marty knows historically, what was
From the
done
beginning.
with Lot 1.
Yep.
Yes, I was having a little discussion with Mr. Joyner about that, and Dr. Koontz, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am going from memory here, so bear with me, that the original developer satisfied that condition by plantings on your private lot rather than in the common area.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I think, with that said, I think the original condition was in fact satisfied. But that said, I don't want to get in the way of discussion tonight, a new discussion about the matter tonight. But I just tried to confirm my understanding of how it was originally satisfied.
It was only because of that condition that the developer sat down to meet with us to figure out how we could mitigate the
Right.
impact as much as possible.
So the question going forward is, how do you mitigate for the 3-story buildings that are going to impact the Roberson Place folks and Purple Leaf?
Yes, and I mean, just staff perspective in terms of the testimony I'm providing, the proposed landscaping plan does comply with the usual landscaping requirements for screening between the uses here, by way of what's in the land use ordinance. I mean, if there is need for additional landscaping, I'll defer to Nick on the applicability of or the reasonableness of council imposing a higher standard, but the plan in front of you does comply with what the ordinance requires. I hope that's helpful.
It is. Thank you. Councilmember Palmer?
No, I'm comfortable deferring to staff on what they think is feasible on this.
As it relates to
as
a
it
higher
relates
standard?
As it relates to what the existing, because in reading the staff document, it was I'm going to get the terminology wrong, but a broken screen, I think. And so that's, am I wrong there, Marty? I guess that's a question for Marty. But if the previous condition somehow changed the standard, then I think it's appropriate to ask staff to look into that and this property.
This time
As well. But if what was done in the previous time is at the same standard that this new design meets, then I don't.
Can't we?
Yeah.
The same. Marty, did you?
I missed the very beginning. I was distracted.
I'm sorry. So the standard that I'm understanding is in the LUO that they have to meet is the broken screen. And so I guess my question is, was what was done for other property owners in the original set, did that raise the standard, or was it to that broken screen standard? And then how does this design as it exists meet one way or the other?
Let me find my way back to the condition. So this was not, as I'm reading, reminding myself of exactly how the condition was worded and consistent with my memory, this was not, the condition was not tied to a broken versus opaque specific type of screening within the land use ordinance. It was more, just as it reads, mitigate visual impacts through additional landscaping. And at that time, it was a mutually agreed upon condition between the developer and the council. I hope that's helpful if I understood your question correctly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say and underscore that the screening question for the residents now and the nuisance question, they're both livability issues. And that's primary to, approval. And so I would like to see that we could find a way to address both of those.
I do want to push back on that a little bit and make a distinction between the two scenarios, because I think on the one hand we have the nuisance, which is inactive and sort of, I think we can take broad, we hear that a principle, a statute, in fact, of our town ordinance is being violated. Here we have our ordinance being complied with. And so that, those are not, this is sort of a sensitive, and I'm hesitant to I think, be as heavy-footed as I'm about to be. But I think it's, in that the existence of this 45 is not material to what's in front of us tonight. The compliance with the screening offered with our LUO is what is offered. And I think there is, in addition to the issue of compliance adjudication, there's the question of the sort of valence of sightlines. And this is where, on the one hand, we are using the downtown livability standards, and on the other hand, we are considering the relative desirability of seeing a property. And so I think that is, again, one of these contradictions we have in patchworking this process through an SUP and the invocation of these various somewhat conflicting documents. And in my mind, I'm sympathetic to the character change as a hindrance, but I don't see how we can statutorily require a developer to do better than our LUO, which they are meeting across the street in an easement. This is me, and it's not only a separate principle than what's being applied in 45, by virtue of the proximity of the lots, But it's a separate question than whether this previously existing condition was previously satisfied or not.
Councilmember Palmer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councilmember Palmer?
So the question in my mind is how to answer how is this materially different from what happened before? And I think you spoke to part of that, but another part of this is process, that this was a different owner that was under different negotiation, and they made it was a mutual agreement, right? And so I'm comfortable asking staff as they draft this to have a follow-up conversation, but I'm not comfortable telling staff that they need to make a change to this to 45, right? And that's because both parties have to agree. We can't make them exceed the standard
That we have set.
that we have set.
That we have set.
And so am I articulating that correctly, that that's the difference?
You are, and I think what we're both resting in some comfort, and this is Mr. Kuntz too. I think we've seen a history of good faith with the developer, and I think that he's indicated that he's willing to continue having a conversation about this. And I do hope that happens, and I have every anticipation that it will. But procedurally, I think it's not appropriate to place a further condition in reference to 45 to this screen.
I'll make just one more comment. While you all were talking, we had a quick sidebar in the hall. We're not sure where we could put trees collectively, because if we went adjacent, it's a right-of-way. I think it's a Carrboro town street. So I don't know if we'd be allowed to plant in there, right? But if we are and a couple trees in there works, then that would be great. So we're totally open to that conversation. I don't think anybody can answer that tonight if it works.
Okay. Thank you for that. We appreciate that. That's helpful. Marty, looks like we're all good. As we said, we're talking about earlier, and this will need to come back to the council. The council is on board with all 54. Okay, it says 52. 54 conditions. And we would need, so the public hearing is closed, and we do need a motion and a second to provide that direction for this item to come back for our approval.
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
And seconded.
Councilmember
Sorry, would you like more detail on that motion?
Yeah, let's get detail on the motion, exactly what it is, so the public and all of us understand. Thank you for that.
Okay, so Marty, correct me if I leave anything out that you need, but I move that we ask staff to bring us back a decision document containing all of the areas to which testimony has been given tonight that's required, all of the conditions we need to certify are met, the 54 agreed upon conditions, so that we can proceed with the approval of the SUP.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I believe that covers it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, that covers the approval with conditions, all 54. Thank you so much, Councilmember Frey. I believe it was seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. Now, council members, are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Let's see who wants to clear out. So we are actually at the proclamations, because we did move the proclamations to this section of our agenda. We were waiting for the good rabbi to come. I believe I see him back there smiling. Hello. And do you want to go ahead and read yours? It's at the podium.
I thought the other one was going first.
I can do it first.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can do that.
I think it makes sense.
Okay. Okay, I'm here to bring forth a proclamation for the National Day of Racial Healing. We did hear a poem about that earlier from our Carrboro poet laureate, Liza, and so we have a proclamation to go along with that. I will be reading a portion of this proclamation. Whereas the National Day of Racial Healing is an annual observance initiated as part of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation's Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation program, and promoted by the program's many community partners across the United States. And whereas fundamental to this day is a clear understanding that racial healing is at the core of racial equity, and whereas this day is meant to raise awareness of the continuing need for racial healing and to transform societal structures to affirm the value of all people. And whereas we understand and recognize that we all must work earnestly and intentionally to build an equitable and just society in which all people can thrive and in which children have the opportunity to learn and grow in nurturing environments that protect their safety, dignity, and humanity. Whereas the town of Carrboro is committed to advancing racial equity, which is demonstrated through some of our more recent actions, which include creating and implementing the Carrboro Family Financial Assistance Program, using ARPA funds for residents with financial challenges resulting from the pandemic for housing, utilities, childcare, internet, and transportation from January through October of 2024. Renaming Carr Street to Braxton Fouché Street, March 2024. Evaluating town of Carrboro practices, policies, procedures, and services using a racial equity assessment lens. Launching Boost Carrboro, a BIPOC-centered entrepreneurship training and coaching program. Hiring a social worker assigned to the community care and diversion response team. Offering Green Neighborhood Program grants to community. And also, whereas members of the town's Youth Advisory Board, the Carrboro Youth Council, and the Chapel Hill Carrboro NAACP Youth Council did hold a special celebration of Martin Luther King Jr. on this past Saturday, January 18th, 2025 at 1 p.m. in the Carrboro Century Center. And whereas communities throughout the United States and around the world acknowledge either the Tuesday following Martin Luther King Jr. Day or the third Tuesday in January as National Day of Racial Healing as a way to promote relationship building, truth-telling, and racial equity, healing and solidarity, and transformative action. Now, therefore, I, Barbara M. Fouché, Mayor of the town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim January 21st, today, 2025, the Tuesday following Martin Luther King Jr. Day, as National Day of Racial Healing in Carrboro, and encourage all residents to share ideas, to share knowledge and points of view related to truth, racial healing, transformation, and racial equity. This, the 21st day of January 2025. I do believe I will be joined here by our Chief Race and Equity Officer, Anita Jones McNair, to accept this proclamation and to provide a couple of comments. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much for this acknowledgement. This is the 9th year of our National Day on Racial Healing, and I want to remind everyone that racial healing is an ongoing process. So I would like to encourage all of our community members to reflect and connect with each other throughout the week as well as throughout the year. And we're also allowing a platform that's available for our community members. If you'd like to share your thoughts and feelings, log on to Carrboro Connect, engage Carrboro, nc.gov, or we also have a phone number that if you'd like to leave your comments by phone, 919-913-3182. We have a portal set up, and we certainly would love to hear from the community and begin the conversation, which is so important. Thank you.
Very nice, thank you so much. Really? Y'all doing a lot. All right, what are we doing? You need the proclamation? You want me to hold it? Yeah, that's okay. Thank you, John. Thank you. Is this yours? Yep. So for the next proclamation, I'd like to call up Councilmember Randy Haven O'Donnell to present it. Is here at the podium for you, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell.
And the proclamation's there?
Mhm.
Thank you, Mayor Fushi. It's kind of awkward. Actually, the public that I need to speak to. Okay. This is the International Holocaust Remembrance Day proclamation. Whereas the Holocaust, Yom HaShoah, is the day of remembrance for the genocide extinguishing the lives of approximately 6 million Jews and 5 million additional people that included those with disabilities, racial minorities, LGBTQ+, political dissidents, the Roma, the Sinti, the Slavs, as well as those who worked to protect others who were killed or endured abuse by the Nazi regime and their collaborators. And whereas in 1980, the United States Congress established the Days of Remembrance as the nation's annual commemoration of the Holocaust, this year, Yom HaShoah, is April 24th. It is the time set aside to honor all victims, survivors, and liberators, as a reflection on the importance of dignity and respect for all persons. And whereas the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution in November 2005 to designate the 27th of January as the International Day of Commemoration in memory of the victims of the Holocaust, and to mark the anniversaries of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau camp, and to honor the victims and survivors of the Holocaust. And whereas in solidarity with the United Nations International Holocaust Remembrance Day and the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp, Carrboro designates and honors Monday, January 27, 2025, as the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And whereas in this time of increased anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, we must be more vigilant with our official commemoration of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day and the victims of the Nazi regime. We promote Holocaust education throughout the world. It is imperative to affirmatively speak out and oppose hatred and actions to attack, murder, or commit other heinous acts against people because of their religion, race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, disabilities, or other qualities of their personhood. Whereas, to quote and paraphrase Colorado Governor Jared Polis, quote, "In a time when we cannot take our democracy or the rule of law for granted, we should be increasingly alert to threats against minority communities." And whereas we echo the words of Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, who warned, quote, "A genocide begins with the killing of one man, person, not for what he or they has or had done, but because of who he or they are," end quote. And whereas the International Holocaust Remembrance Day has been set aside for the people of the town of Carrboro to join together as a community to remember the victims of the Holocaust, as well as to reflect on the need for respect and non-discriminatory allyship of all peoples, and to overcome intolerance and indifference through learning and remembrance. Now, therefore, and I'm speaking for our mayor, I, Barbara Foushee, mayor of the town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby declare January 27, 2025 as the International Holocaust Remembrance Day in the town of Carrboro, and encourage all community members to reflect on this day of remembrance, this, the 21st day of January 2025. And just ahead of asking Rabbi Solomon Hoffman to come up to receive this proclamation, I do want to say how fitting it is that not only was I able to read this proclamation following the proclamation on racial healing, but to come behind what Nita Jones McNair said about truth and healing and how that is essential, especially in this time, and to just also lift up the words of Liza Wolfe Francis when she read Nikki Giovanni's poem, to echo Never Again. So Rabbi Solomon, if you'd come up. I am doing them. Thank you. Would you like to say something?
Thank you, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell, and thank you, Mayor Foushee, for recognizing this day. I want to just start by saying that another reason why it's so important to mark these days is that the generation of Holocaust survivors is gradually dying out. And part of my upbringing in Jewish community was to hear the stories of survivors and to learn their experiences, to understand what happened to them. And for many of these survivors for a long time, when they came 1950s, 60s, there was a culture of not talking about what they experienced. And over time, they needed to talk about it because people started to deny what they had experienced. So I consider myself fortunate to have heard directly from survivors about the resilience they had and the courage that they had in the face of such horrible times. And I feel some sadness that the coming generations will not be able to hear from them directly. So I think this work of really acknowledging these days and looking at them as days of healing as well, to also echo those words, I think is so important. And secondly, as we see the forces of hate and division continue to be with us in our halls of government, yesterday was a difficult day to witness some of this, and people making gestures, people using their words in ways that really elevate the politics of division and fear. And I hope that we can use this moment in a way that encourages us to come together. I really felt that so strongly yesterday with Mayor Foushee at the NAACP MLK service, and just really valuing the opportunities to come together across religion, race, ethnicity. I serve as the Associate Rabbi at Kehillah Synagogue in Chapel Hill, and I just want to say that our doors are always open if anyone would like to come and be with us for prayer or learning. We'd love to have you. I lost the last thing I was going to say, but thank you for accommodating me and moving this later in the meeting, and I really appreciate this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. The obligatory picture.
Oh, if you want
A picture, Randy.
Oh.
Take it with
Sure.
Town Manager Tony, the next item, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The next item is one item on the general agenda tonight. It's an information item. This is to present the findings and recommendations of a disparity study conducted by Griffin and Strong. They will talk about some of our town's procurement procedures and practices. Our Economic Development Director, as he approaches the podium, this is John Hartman Brown, will introduce the item and the consultants.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm happy to report that we are to the final stage of the disparity study, and so I'm happy to present our consulting team on this project and happy to present you with this final report. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Griffin and Strong team, and Hannah Rowell is going to introduce their team. So Hannah will turn it over to you.
Thank you, John.
Can't hear.
Rowell. I am a project manager with Griffin and Strong and have served as the primary point of contact for the Town of Carrboro disparity study. It's nice to see you all this evening. I am joined by several other members of the Griffin and Strong team, so I will give just a moment for everyone to go around and unmute and introduce themselves briefly, please.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Greg Price, Chief Economist, Griffin and Strong. Good evening.
Michelle Clark Jenkins, Director of Research and Methodology, Griffin and Strong. Hema.
Good night. Hema Das Narayan Singh, Senior Manager Consultant. David.
Hi, good evening. David Maher. I'm with the Legal Division at Griffin and Strong.
Good evening, Vince Egan, a Senior Consultant with Griffin and Strong.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Thomas Strand, Data Analytic Coordinator at the GSBC.
Alrighty, thank you, everyone. We have prepared a presentation for you all this evening, so I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right. So as John mentioned, this is the Town of Carrboro, North Carolina 2025 disparity study presentation of our findings and recommendations. So just to briefly go over the agenda that we will cover in this presentation, I'll briefly walk through our study methodology as well as our study parameters. And then Dr. Egan will go into the relevant geographic market analysis as well as the results of our quantitative findings. Michelle will present some overall findings from the report as well as the commendations to the town as well as recommendations that have come out of the findings of the study. And then we'll go over next steps of where to go after this disparity study has concluded and save time at the end for a Q&A session as well. So first, an overview of the study methodology. So we have a lot of different parts of our study, and we find that it's helpful to lay it out all together so that you can see how the parts interact with each other and flow from one step to the next. So we always start out with our legal analysis, reviewing relevant case law that backs the disparity study and is relevant in the specific circuit courts that the study is occurring in. We also have our policies and procedure review, where we review the Town of Carrboro's written policies and procurement procedures. A large part of our of our study is data collection, data engagement, and overall data analysis. So we start by collecting and cleaning data from the Town of Carrboro before finally moving into our data analysis, which starts with our relevant market analysis, our utilization and threshold analysis, availability analysis, and then finally our disparity analysis or disparity indices, which are a result of our utilization and availability comparison. We also have our private sector or marketplace disparities analysis as well. and our anecdotal evidence collection and analysis, which all support the data analysis that is found throughout the study. And then ultimately, we end up at the end of the study where we put together our final report and the recommendations like we'll walk through today. Those can be race and gender neutral as well as race and gender conscious recommendations depending on the results of the disparity study. As far as the study parameters, we did have a specific study period that was July 1, 2017 through June 30th, 2022. So fiscal year 2018 through 22. We also had 5 defined industry categories for the study. These were construction, architecture and engineering, professional services, other services, and goods. And I'll hand it over to Dr. Egan to present the relevant market analysis.
Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, the reason we do a relevant market analysis is the simple beginning point of a disparity study is there some disparity between the availability of women and minority-owned firms and their utilization, and we have to do that with firms in a particular area, and we do it in an area close to the agency we're studying, where they do the firms that do the bulk of their spending, about 75%. And we found that to be a 10-county area around Carrboro, and these are the percentages. And you did about 85% of your spending there, but particularly in construction, A&E, and professional services. Goods is almost always spread out much broader than that narrow area. Next slide. We then looked at availability. Our approach to availability were those firms who were affirmatively seeking work with government agencies within that relevant market. And you can see the availability range between, for MWBEs, women and minority-owned firms, between 13% and 32%. It was highest in construction and A&E. It was highest for minority firms in construction. Next slide. Then this is a summary of prime utilization across the 5 procurement categories of construction, architecture, engineering, professional services, other services, and goods. Across all those categories, you did about 10.5% with women and minority-owned firms, about 3% with minority-owned firms, and 7% with non-minority woman-owned firms. The highest was in construction, in particular for non-minority women-owned firms. For minority firms, the highest was in other services, followed by architecture and engineering. Next slide. Then the disparity, we found disparity for all the categories, comparing that availability utilization except non-minority women in construction. The X is where there is substantial disparity. So we found that except for non-minority women in construction, Hispanics in A&E, Asian Americans in other services, and Hispanic Americans in other services. Next slide. The town did not track subcontracting dollars, so that really limited our subcontracting analysis. We did a survey of prime vendors to see what subs they used, but the results were quite limited. We only got about $182,000 in sub data and none in professional services and goods, and almost all of it was in A&E subcontracting dollars, and almost all of that went to non-minority woman-owned firms. Overall, women and minority-owned firms got 90% of the reported subcontractor dollars. But because of the limited data, we didn't do any disparity analysis of subcontracting.
Thank you, Dr. Egan. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Egan. I'm going to hand it over to Michelle now to present our findings, commendations, and recommendations.
Actually, I'm going to pass it to David to do the
okay.
Yes, good evening. So for the overall finding, Griffin and Strong found that the town does have a factual basis to establish race and gender conscious program elements for some of the groups, in addition to the existing race and gender neutral efforts and some other recommendations for race and gender neutral programs. The regression analysis that was conducted found that disparities by race, ethnicity, or gender status of the firm owners remained even after controlling for capacity and other race and gender neutral factors. And finally, the anecdotal findings and practices and procedures findings, and that's the policy practices and procedures findings, supported the statistical analysis and the regression.
So we do have some commendations for the town, actually quite a few. The first one is that the town has a training partnership with and recently began that with, and it's called Empowerment Inc. This was outside the study period, but we commend the town for beginning that partnership. Targeted bid advertisement. Our staff interviews showed that the town does advertise bids in a publication specifically targeting minority communities. We also want to commend the town for establishing the Racial Equity Commission, which is 12 town residents appointed by the town council. So we really love that. Next slide, please. Prompt payment to primes. This is very unusual. We had a small number of our survey respondents who actually had been paid by the town, but there were 25 of them, and all of them indicated that they had been paid relatively on time. We didn't have any respondents who said they had been paid over 60 days. That never happens. So we commend the town for that. We commend the town for their outreach plan. The outreach plan and guidelines for recruitment and selection of minority businesses for participation in town building construction contracts. So this is great because it actually provides an outline for requirements for outreach, utilization, documentation, and good faith efforts for MWB participation in town contracts and projects. So we do have a number of recommendations as well. Oh, we do have a couple of more commendations, I think. We also want to commend the town because of its comprehensive purchasing policy. Even some larger jurisdictions don't have a really good purchasing policy, which you did have. We also commend you on having a policy that indicated when bonds could be waived by the purchasing officer. So those were all of our commendations. So of our recommendations, the first thing we just want to mention is that it's possible that some of the recommendations we make may have a requirement for you to consider additional staff or resources. So again, take that into account as you consider our recommendations, whether they may take some additional staffing or resources, or how you might phase it in with current staffing and resources until you can get more. So we are recommending that you include a commercial non-discrimination policy in all of your vendor contracts. We're aware that you have a non-discrimination policy with regard to employment, but we recommend that you have a detailed commercial non-discrimination policy. It's important because the town actually has an obligation not to be a passive participant with any discriminatory activities of its primes. And so you want to make sure that you're admonishing your primes to make sure that they are adhering to a non-discrimination policy, particularly when it comes to hiring subcontractors. Our next recommendation is to create an electronic database of vendors. The town does have a vendor application form that can be found on the website, but we also recommend that you keep and maintain and utilize an online vendor registration system that really allows for the creation of a usable vendor database. Those vendors become kind of your pool of firms that become kind of your in crowd, that you give notices to. When there are new bids, they come in as bidders. Hopefully you require them to register before they bid. That's also a good policy. And then you have this pool of vendors that become kind of your known vendors. And hopefully there are a lot more local firms that become part of that. But right now there isn't really a usable electronic vendor database. There is also been a perception of the businesses in the community that there is a disconnect between the town and the vendors, so it would help to build relationships to have an electronic database of registered vendors, again, that you can utilize and kind of call your own. Our next recommendation is to set annual benchmarks. These annual benchmarks are really an internal measure of how well you're doing. So we've given you a disparity study report that gives an availability by ethnicity and gender. And so at the end of every year, you should take account of, how well are we doing? Like look at from all sources, whether they're primes or subcontractors, what's the percentage that you've been utilizing of minority and women-owned firms, and measure that against your annual benchmarks or aspirational goals to see how well you're doing. We also are recommending that you align your aspirational MWBE goals with the goals from the disparity study availability. So the town really has, where it has used some subcontracting, has really been using, what the state has and kind of a one-size-fits-all goal. But each contract should be considered, and this has been important, particularly in the Fourth Circuit where you are, that you are adjusting your goals on a contract-by-contract basis. There really isn't a one-size-fits-all. At the end of the day, whatever the availability, let's say in construction of firms across the board are, you could have a contract that's blasting and demolition, and that might not be the right percentage for that particular contract. So you want to make sure that you are adjusting your goals on a contract by contract basis. And because of limited staffing, it does make sense to do this contract by contract goal setting only in construction and A&E, and maybe begin with large dollar contracts and then expand as you have available resources. Even when we analyze all areas, the majority of subcontracting really does happen in construction and A&E. So when you have limited staff and resources, probably a good idea to start there. We don't recommend setting goals in goods just because there are few or very limited subcontracting opportunity in goods, although goods can be used to satisfy goals in other areas. For example, you may have a construction contract, and if you're buying concrete for that construction contract, that could be used to satisfy a goal in construction. Our next recommendation is to enhance contract compliance. And contract compliance is really the watching out for what what's happening, starting with following that solicitation from the beginning all the way through the end of a contract and kind of keeping an eye on it. The first thing is to do kind of an assessment of the firms in your area, and you'll have this availability. Our availability list is a real list of firms in your relevant market, and you can be active in terms of reaching out to them, in terms of assessing. If you have a contract coming up and there's a firm down the street who does that kind of work, but they're not registered to do business with you, nothing stops the town from saying, hey, you might want to come and register with us and take a look. This is coming up in the next year. And I'll talk about forecasting in a second. But contract compliance is also you encouraging firms to get registered with you so they can get notification of bids, encouraging them to get certified by the state, either as a DBE or as a hub firm. And then also, one of the most important parts is tracking and monitoring. If you don't track and monitor the utilization of firms, then a lot of these programs you're putting in place kind of won't come for naught, because you won't know how well you're doing. So it's really important that you are tracking the utilization of particularly MWBE firms, and all subcontractors really. And a lot of that work can be done not by you, but have the primes do it. When the primes put in for their pay apps or put in for a payment, require them to report what subs they're using and how much they've paid them, and then you'll have that documentation. Then our next recommendation is to enforce the state's prompt pay provisions. We had firms who reported issues with being paid on time, particularly at the subcontractor level. And again, that's keeping your eye on what's happening with subcontractors. And we know that for small businesses and subcontractors, delays in them getting paid and sometimes can put them out of business, depending on how long they have to wait to get paid. So we are suggesting that you put the prompt pay provision in as a contract term with prime contractors in an attempt to remedy this, particularly with regard to subcontractors getting paid on time. Then our next recommendation is a small business reserve. I really love this recommendation because it helps to support and grow the capacity of small businesses in your area. It also helps firms who have traditionally been subcontractors to be incentivized to come over and try to be prime contractors or vendors directly with the town. And what it is that you set a threshold under which only small businesses can bid. We did hear from firms that there was a concern about unfair competition with large firms, and so this would kind of take care of that. And it could be a small business reserve, could be anything under 25,000. We've seen some of those in some areas, some places it's 50,000 or even higher. But even something like if you're doing an award under 25,000 or under 50,000, that award is only done to a small business. And it really is very popular because subcontractors, firms that have been subcontractors, can come over and go through the process of winning an award as a prime. And then once they kind of get their feet wet, you'll find that they will begin to bid on larger and larger contracts that help to grow their capacity and also provide more competition for the town. We also, along these same lines, look at encouraging the use of MWBEs in P-card and informal quotes. That's really a good thing when you have informals, to try to get the use of them with MWBEs. And if you're getting 3 quotes on something, ask them to try to get at least one of those quotes from an MWBE. Our next recommendation is to enhance communications and marketing resources. We found that firms were complaining about a lack of outreach and indicated the belief that there was an informal network of firms who get contracts over and over again, and that it's hard to get in and as a newcomer, or if you don't already have a relationship, to get in. So enhancing communications, that includes things like forecasting before a solicitation goes out, maybe around the time that you've got your budget approved for the year, is to broadcast what the opportunities that will be coming up. That allows internally for you to target market to firms in the area about what's coming up. It allows them to particularly team, register, or get themselves ready for what's coming without only having 6 or 8 weeks to prepare for a solicitation. So forecasting is one way you could do that. It's targeted outreach. And then also our anecdotal evidence showed that firms lacked an understanding of the town's purchasing policies and processes. So this would be a good way of communicating more with them about how to do business with the town. Next slide, please. I'll turn it over to Thomas to talk about data.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Good evening, everyone. Now I want to share with you some recommendations related to the data side. First, for the vendor system, centralizing the vendor list within the finance department is an excellent step. However, although there are over 12,000 vendors in the vendor list, only 116 vendors have the phone numbers recorded. The town should ensure that the vendor contact information, such as phone numbers and email addresses, is consistently captured across all datasets. Additionally, vendor certification and commodity codes, where applicable, should be included in vendor list. For the commodity codes, we recommend adopting standardized systems like NIGP codes, NIC codes, or the town general ledger code. Standardization enhance data accuracy and ensure that consistent across the sources. Moreover, vendor application also allow firms to self-identify and describe their work. Self-identified work category should be maintained within the centralized vendor list for the future reference. For bids, a centralized electronic database should be established. This database would allow the town promptly retrieve the details such as bidder information, bid types, and solicitation numbers without manually PDF inspection. Suggested database fields include bid number, creation date, date close, vendor information, and project details. Currently, bid types are managed by individual project managers, but unifying this process under centralized system would improve efficiency and accessibility. So now moving to the payments. The current Excel file often truncated vendor names, making identification difficult. We recommend that maintain full vendor names in the payment dataset and associating payments with the contract, purchase order numbers for better clarity and organization. For awards and contracts, centralize them in an electronic database within the finance department is essential. The database should capture critical details like project or bid number, start and end dates, creation date, contract type, and information on vendor and subcontractors. Finally, for the subcontractor data, The town should consistently track subcontractor utilization across all the projects. Whenever possible, it is important to record race and gender information, ideally through certification data.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Alrighty, so now that you've heard the results of the study, and we've walked through the recommendations that came out of the results of those studies, where do we go next and what are the next steps for the town? So we've outlined it here in some 6 key steps, one being accepting the study and its recommendations. 2 would be to conduct a gap analysis, look at what needs new legislation and what could be implemented under current authority. 3 is to plan for implementation, organizing the steps, the phases, and the tasks to achieve implementation. 4 is to create a program plan or policy. Next, determine a budget and staffing needs for new program elements, as Michelle mentioned in one of the recommendations. And then finally, developing a training protocol and training your staff. So with that, our presentation has concluded. So I did want to save time at the end, like I mentioned, for any questions from anyone.
All right, thank you so much, Hannah and the rest of the team. Great presentation. We appreciate all the work that went into it. Council members, are there any questions about the presentation, comments? Councilmember Haven O'Donnell.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. It was so voluminous. It took me a while to get through even half of it, but it's excellent material. I'd like to know, how do you think that this interfaces with our Carrboro's key interest in being relentlessly local? You know, and supporting our local non-traditional entrepreneurial enterprises. I think part of that is answered by the small business reserve. I think I really like that. But I think one of the larger questions I have is, you know, we try very hard to circulate our money locally. So how do you see that interface?
So I'll answer that. So our relevant market, which is what we studied and what our plan would apply to, was really just followed after where you're already spending your dollars. So those counties that we said were part of the relevant market are really part of, you know, where you are, like I said, where you're already spending your dollars. If you would like to make that more narrow, in other words, local meaning firms that are located in Carrboro or some much smaller set of that, you know, that's not our scope of work. Was really to look at minority and women-owned firms, but you know, there's another slice of that, which is nothing really keeps you from looking at whether you want to do some sort of a local program or, you know, make that small business reserve program could be a local. We've seen a lot of places have a local small business reserve program. The only drawback to that is that you don't want to just hand out contracts. So you have to have enough firms so that there's competition within that group. So, you know, if at the end of the day, if you make it a you know, only firms in Carrboro can be part of a program, then you've got to be careful that you've got at least 3 businesses who can compete for that contract. Otherwise, you're kind of just, you know, giving out contracts to the one firm locally who does that work. So we really would recommend that you look at expanding it just so that you have some competition. But again, this is where our relevant market that we determine is already where you're spending the lion's share of your dollars.
Excellent. And let me just follow this up to ask, you know, in the town of Carrboro, we have El Centro and the CEL, which is the Center for Employment and Leadership. And one of the key programs that has been developed in the CEL in the last 2 years is a program with Durham Tech and Orange County Durham Tech for different certifications. How do you see that that can help inform, or how it can work into meeting some of the gap?
Well, you've got, having local anchor institutions and partners to help you, particularly with supportive services, is really important. You've got a lot of local resources, around you, technical colleges, et cetera, so that even some of the supportive service things that we've suggested, don't have to be done by you. They can be done in partnership with those local organizations who, we did a study for Toledo, Ohio, and one of the things we did with them was we met with all of the local organizations. They did a presentation to them, and there's a room full of not-for-profits or, business support organizations or, trade schools and the library. And as we went through some of the things we were talking about, they were raising their hand and saying, well, I can help with that. Well, I can help with that. So they can be very helpful partners in carrying out, the ideals of particularly the supportive services parts of what we're recommending.
Yeah, so just to follow that up, an example is that the CEL with Durham Tech has a electrician certification program, and I think it's in its second year, and that program helps to get folks certified for electrical contracting. And, I don't know that that's something that we necessarily tap into. So is it possible to, develop partnerships not only with the CEL but with Durham Tech under the the small business reserve? I'm trying to understand really how that mechanism works.
Yeah, the small business reserve is really internal in the sense of it's small contracts that you're setting aside that only small business can bid on. However, to get firms ready to do that, a firm who's traditionally, I've never bid before, I've only been a sub, I don't even know how to go about bidding. That's where those technical schools can come in to play. Or like you said, there needs to be a certain license, and you've got firms who can do the work but maybe haven't gotten the license, and so they come in and get the license. So they can help you in the preparation of firms coming over to be part of that small business reserve.
Got it. Thank you. Very helpful.
Thank you, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell. Any other questions? And I only have one question. I believe it probably is for the town manager about the recommendations and next steps for the town and what we can expect as the council to come from the staff side.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, this was a good report, and they presented a draft report to staff previously. And so they began this work in, I believe, 2023. The contract was signed. So there are some things we have done. I think we may need additional staff support for MWBE, specifically in our finance department. I've already asked John to review the findings with our department heads, and so Chaz is here now on board as well. And so we really are going to look at our purchasing policies and make sure that we have a robust MWBE program. So we'll talk internally about this. There was a lot of details, These are all operational details for the most part. We'll come back to you all for policy level recommendations and support through the budget process if we need it for additional support, if this is a priority for you all.
Okay, I'm just going to, I know for me it's a priority. And when I look at the recommendations, would we be able to make progress on all of those? Have we started on some of those? Seemed like you said maybe we
Can we see that slide again?
might have dug into those for the recommendations.
The 6, yeah.
Or the next steps, which
Oh,
one do you
thank
want? Okay.
Yeah, so are you saying are you asking staff, can we
Right,
go
so
out
there
on
were
all
eight,
6?
there were 8 recommendations, right? And so then there's next steps for the town, so accepting the study and its recommendations. And I was trying to gauge with Town Manager Tony, which she may or may not know tonight, about our ability to be able to kind of click on all cylinders with those 8.
We will definitely internally look at it and have
Okay.
more discussions, flush through the recommendations, and just see what our current capacity is with
Right.
staffing. We really are trying to rebuild our finance team, and so we're just starting with that. And then Chaz is looking at his team and capacity and abilities, and then we will determine what else do we need from there to implement the recommendations. So we will definitely be back.
Yeah, that sounds good, and I know you're going to get all this prioritized, and we'll be in a good place. So, council members, if there are no further questions, all we needed to do was accept this report, and,
I'll make a motion to accept the report.
all right, thank you so
Seconded.
much. Okay.
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded that we accept the disparity study report as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you so much, Hannah and team. Griffin and Strong showed up strong, looking good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you.
Uh-huh.
Thank
Good
you so
night.
much.
All right, y'all have a good night.
You as well.
I believe we're at the end of our agenda.
So I would like to just really quickly, if I could,
Oh, I'm
Madam
sorry.
Mayor.
Go
No,
ahead,
no, no,
Mayor
that's
Pro
totally
Tem
fine.
now.
This is probably redundant, but just in the interest of being clear and make sure that we're all on the same page. I'd like to move that before we go into our summer recess, we have an agenda item about the current state of enforcement for PZI infractions between neighbors. In particular, I'd be interested in seeing my suspicion is that this is going to be like a really tough issue to to do a lot better on with resources. But I would be interested in seeing what other towns do. I would be interested in seeing whether there exists the ability to add capacity to PZI for this enforcement. I would be interested to see just how, we have a couple different situations where we have friction between neighbors where one side is clearly in violation of town ordinances. And I think that this is vexatious to our staff, because I don't think that we have the capacity or necessarily the means, and I don't think calling the police is the answer for most of these. So I would love to just, before we go into summer, I would love an agenda item about the current state of this and what we think is maybe possible to clean up, if it's all right for me to make that motion. Well, regardless, I'm going to make it.
Make the motion, Mayor.
Yeah, so
Pro Tem now.
I'd like to
Received.
move we get that report on PZI enforcement status and possibilities before the summer recess.
Thank you for that. Could I get a second?
I'll second that.
All right. It sounds great to me because I feel like it is in alignment with what we witnessed here tonight and the continuing concerns around development, responsibilities post-development, and everything in between. So,
I'd
did you
also
want to
like
say
just like
something?
to know how it's going to inform us going forward with the new LUO. Because there's properties that could be in a position of changing zoning that, had operated under, a different set of guidelines.
A whole different set of rules. Town Manager Tony, you got all of that. I know you did. So we have a motion and a second for that to occur, a work session before the summer.
Not necessarily a work session, if we need it,
Is
but
it a work
just an
session
agenda item.
Or
is
an
all
agenda
yeah.
item. So an agenda item before the summer. And so we have that motion and second. I feel like we're good to go. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there anything else from council members? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded that we adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We're adjourned.